Alright, welcome back guys to the Introduction to JavaScript course. Good to have you here. Let's get started. Alright, who am I? I'm Kaustubh, you can call me KG. I'll be teaching you session 2 of the Introduction to JavaScript today. Before we move ahead, let's look at the session outline. We will be covering fundamentals of programming. We will be covering variables, expressions, and learn a few data types that JavaScript provides us. We will also cover this. Oh, my mistake. We'll also cover this, which is super important in the JavaScript environment to understand. And we'll also cover the strict mode. So let's go ahead. Again, if you have not taken HTML CSS course before, I'm going to strongly encourage you to take them before, because we will be dealing with HTML and DOM from session 4 onwards heavily. So I highly recommend you take these courses. Alright, so let's do a recap of the previous session. So in the previous session we learned the difference between being a web developer and a web designer, and we learned about setting up the system as well. Hopefully you guys have installed Google Chrome browser and Visual Studio Code editor. So if you have all of those tools installed, let's begin. Alright, so fundamentals of programming. Okay, over the years, I have come to the conclusion that most novice programmers make a mistake of not understanding and absorbing the fundamentals of programming, but they make a mistake of jumping directly to build projects. Don't get me wrong, I'm also guilty of doing that, especially for new technologies that I've been trying to learn. For example, blockchain. I've been trying to learn blockchain for about a few months now, 5 or 6 months now actually, and my first impulse is to directly start coding and start working on the project, which is a bad idea. You have to complete the fundamentals first. We need to take the first principles approach and understand the fundamentals of any concept that we want to master. So if you're not aware of first principles, I strongly recommend you check it on Google. Having said that, let's begin. So the first thing we are going to understand is what are expressions in JavaScript. So expression is any valid unit of code that resolves to a value. So if you look at this example right here, it says 300 greater than 19. Is it true or false? It's true, right? So this expression will resolve to a Boolean value of true. Now expressions can be further categorized into arithmetic, logical, string, and so on. What kind of expression do you think this is? Okay, so if you guessed it right, congratulations. If you guessed it wrong, it's fine, we are still learning here. The example that we saw here is of category logical. Okay, so now the task for you is to come up with an arithmetic expression. We dealt with logical. You have to come up with an arithmetic expression of your own. I'll give you one example, that is 3 plus 4 equals 7. That is an arithmetic expression with the plus operator to add two numbers. Now you have to come up with different arithmetic expressions of your own. Alright, moving ahead. Semicolons. So semicolons are used to denote the end of expression. So like in the English language you have full stop, right? For ending an expression in JavaScript, use semicolon. They're not mandatory in JavaScript like they are mandatory in some of the programming languages like C or C++, but it's a good practice to end your expressions with semicolons in them. Alright, literals. Okay, literal is a value that is written in a source code. So like for example, if I say a number or string or a Boolean value, that will be a literal that is being added into the source code. All right, moving ahead. Variables. Now this is the most important aspect of learning the fundamentals of programming. I bet you have taken algebra in your high school where you solved for the value of x or y. Remember what x and y were? They were variables, right? So in JavaScript, you also have variables to store the data values. So for example, you see here it says var length equal to 100. The var stands for variable, and var, I call it var, some call it var, it's fine. You can call it either one of those. I say var length equal to 100. That means the variable length 100 stores the value of 100. Let's move ahead. You'll understand the variables a bit more clearly. So, naming a variable. Now, this is an important aspect. The variable name has to be case sensitive. So, if you go back and looked at this example, the variable length, the L is small case, and all of the variables need to start with a small case alphabet. A new variable should have a unique name. It should not be repeated in the code. A variable can start with dollar or underscore, but they should not start with any different literals. They can start with letters, of course. So you have to avoid using the reserved words. So a reserved word can be, for example, this. A reserved word can be if or else. We are not allowed to use those words while declaring a variable. And for the purpose of maintaining the clarity and understanding clearly for other programmers that will be working with you, it's best if you name them according to what value they're going to hold. So if you look at this example right here, this is holding a value of length. So it's better to call this variable length rather than width, or just calling this L or W. Okay, so clarity is important. So what values can be stored in variable? Now in here, when you first create a variable, it does not have a value. Okay, it is undefined. Remember this, because I personally have made these mistakes while learning programming when I was in high school. And if you don't assign a variable a value, you might think it's 0 or null, but it's actually not. It's actually garbage. But in JavaScript, you have something called undefined. And whenever you declare a variable but don't assign any value to it, it's always undefined. So let us go ahead and check this out actually. Let me open up a new window here, and we'll go to JS Fiddle. So for people who are not aware with JS Fiddle is a online tool where we can run JavaScript, and I'll be using the console right here. So let's say if we had var a and just did this, and I wanted to print this out. So for printing it out, I'm going to be using console.log. Don't worry, you'll cover console.log in the later slides. But let's say if you wanted to print this a out, what do you think the value will be? Let me run this. Now this will be loaded inside the console, so let me expand the console, and you see right here it's undefined. I can call this anything that I want. I can call this apple, and I'll say apple. It will still return undefined. Okay, so it needs to hold onto something. So if I say Apple, and if I use this and say, let's say Apple has a MacBook, so I'll say MacBook and print this out, it will give the value of Apple variable. Okay, so let's go back. Variables can hold different types of data. So if we go back in here, now the variable Apple is holding a data type of string. Again, we'll cover string in detail in the later slides, but the point I'm trying to make is a variable can hold any type of data. So it can be either a number, it can be a string, it can be a boolean. Okay. The next thing is the value of a variable can change over time. So we already experienced this right now. So the Apple was undefined first, now it became MacBook. And let's say if I log this out here, and now here I change the value of Apple to, let's say, banana. Who cares? Let's try banana. So let's say console.log Apple, and the first value it shows me is MacBook, and the second value it shows me is banana. That means the value of Apple changed over time, and that's what this point is trying to illustrate. Okay, moving ahead. Types. Okay, to be able to operate on variables, we need to understand what type of data they're holding. So in this example right here, you see on the screen, it says var length equal to 10. So when we assign it to 10, that means the data that the length variable is holding is of type number. Now if we go back to our example right here, the variable Apple is holding the type of data string. If I assign this to a number, then it will hold the value, hold the type of number right here. Okay, moving ahead. So these are the data types that you need to be aware of. So first one is obviously the string. So in our case of Apple and MacBook, MacBook is a string. Number is, again, any number. It can be an integer, it can be a floating point. Boolean is of course true or false. Undefined is something that is not defined. It's usually a garbage number or a garbage value. And null is simply something that is empty. Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, so object is also one of the data types of JavaScript. It is of type key and value pair. So I believe you might have learned this in HTML5 when learning local storage. Local storage is an object that holds key value pairs. If not, we'll again revisit this in one of our projects, the local storage. But again, object holds the key value pairs. So if you want to look at an example, let's go back. Let's clear this out. I'll create a object of person, and this is how we define it. So we'll have a first name. So this is the key, and the value is, let's say, John. The second item, the second key that I want to add here is last name, and I'll say Doe. And you want to give it give another property. Let's say age. Say John is 50, and yeah, I think this is it. This is fine. So let's run this. Nothing happens because we did not log this out. So let's log this out. So we'll say log person and run this. So we got a response of the object that is stored in the variable person. Okay, so if you want to access the individual property, we just have to call them by key. So what you can do is you can say console.log and use the dot operator to access it. So I say dot and I'll say first name. And let me run this. So the first name that is stored in here is John, and this is the response that I get of John. Excellent. Moving back to the slides. Strings. So strings is anything that is enclosed in double quotes. So if you go back, John is of type string, but let us go back and go with a much more simpler example. So we'll say var say string equals my name is John Doe, and let me log this out again. Alright, so var string str, that stands for string, and the value of it is enclosed in double quotes. So this is a value of type string. If this were without double quotes, it would give me an error. Alright, look at here. It says uncaught syntax error. Okay, so let me give in one quick task. So let's say I say 77 here and I added double quotes and we run this. It says 77. What happens if I add the 77 as a string with number 77? What happens in that case? So let's say var result equals 77 plus string, and instead of logging out the string, we will log out result. What do you think will be the result of this? It says 7777. So the reason this happens is because this is a string and this is a number, but it converted or it concatenated everything as one string. Alright, so moving back to the slides. Again, same thing I explained before. You can use concatenation to mix strings and numbers. When you do this, JavaScript will treat number like a string. So in this case, you have number of fruits equal to 6, type of food equal to banana, and all the food equal to I have number of fruit plus type of fruit. Right, so it will create one whole string. Try this out on JS Fiddle before moving on to the next slide. Alright, arrays. So arrays is one of the another data type where you can it's not actually a data type, it's a special variable that can hold multiple values at a time. So the way to define an array is, as you can see here, let us try something with arrays. So let's say for array equals, and we'll add some values. And we'll log this out. So we get a response of multiple values that are stored inside this array for this variable ARR. So array is nothing but a variable that stores multiple values. Alright, moving back on to the slides. Alright, like I said, you'll be looking at console again. So the console object provides access to the browser's debugging console. So if you go back and open up a new tab, and let me go to the developer tools by right clicking anywhere on the page and selecting the inspect option. If I select the console tab here, this is the console that we're talking about that exists in the browser window. So let me clear this up. So this is the console object, and it provides me multiple methods on top of that object. So I can say console dot, and these are the functions that I can run on this console object. So let's say I want to run the log, and I want to pass in something. I'll say hi there, and press enter. It will return hi there. Okay. So the reason we use console object is to access the browser's console and display any message that we want to display over here. So usually we use it to log the errors or log any important information that can be used by the developers. Okay, so let's move back. All right, so comments. So the way we handle comments in JavaScript is by using single line and multi-line. So let's look at example of each one of these. So if I say single line comment, so this is an array, and the multi-line comment can be this is a multi-line comment. All right, and if you run this, this won't be interpreted by the JavaScript runtime, and it won't show on the log. Okay, so this is just a way of adding comments onto your code for other developers to understand. Okay, let's move ahead. All right, so in this session we covered the basics of programming. We covered variables, types, expressions, arrays, strings, and objects, and much more. I hope you enjoyed it. We will need to practice these fundamentals until we get better at grasping them. In the next session, we'll continue our journey of learning the fundamentals by covering conditional statements, loops, and functions. All right, thank you for learning with me. See you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye.